I mean, this has not been a good Oregon defense on the year. Obviously, Dan Lanning is no fool when it comes to coaching on the defensive side. I mean, he was the defensive coordinator for Georgia last year, and contrary to what you might think, I mean, oh well, that's Kirby's defense. Yeah, that's Kirby's defense, but Lanning ran it, and he knows what he's doing. So you're going to be facing a defense that runs basically Georgia's defensive scheme. That's what they run. So same basic defensive stuff that you saw from Bateman for the most part on the back end as well. You're going to get your standard quarters stuff with some Ripley's thrown in there. They'll rotate to single safety and do some of that. A lot of pattern matching. They're trying to make it so that nothing's easy. Problem is they just don't have Georgia's personnel. And so, and it turns out a lot of teams don't. So, that it gets hard to do that if you don't have players up front who are able to cause havoc in the run game. And a couple of their best players there are opt-outs. Their best corner, their best DB is an opt-out. So now you're playing with even less talent than what you had before. And this is a defense that's given up a lot of stuff over the top. It's given up a lot of stuff in the running game. You go through their game or their game log, and the place where they've given up a bunch. Oregon State averaged 6.23 yards per carry, Utah 4.3, Washington 5.8, UCLA averaged 6.2, and that actually is an offense that that one's a number that's relevant because they ran a lot of the same sorts of things that I think you're going to see Carolina run in this game. So they've been vulnerable on the ground, and then that's what set up a lot of those problems in the air for them, is that teams have been able to run it well enough to be multidimensional, and then they've faced a bunch of good quarterbacks, a bunch of decent quarterbacks out there in the Pac-12, and they've given up a lot. So I think there's an opportunity for Carolina here to put up a lot of points. This, to me, looks like a traditional Holiday Bowl. I mean, what, Greg, do you know what the record is for most points scored in a Holiday Bowl?
I do not.
It's got to be high.
We'll look it up.
I'm looking that up now.
So is this, while you're looking up that, Jason, is this a game that Drake needs to go to work, at a high level, or does Carolina need to run the football? Which is the more important side of the equation for Carolina on offense?
I think actually in this case, because you have Drake Maye, because you know what you're going to get in the passing game in general, I think the first thing is making sure you run it well enough that you're giving him opportunities to throw when, sort of in rhythm and in that when he's comfortable. I don't think this is a situation where you just drop back and throw it 70 times, because they do have the ability to get some pressure on you. I think you need to be balanced enough. And because they've given up a lot of rushing yards on the season, you've got some chances. So by the way, I looked it up, 91 points, 46-45 BYU over SMU in 1980. There's a real good chance that's going to be threatened in this Holiday Bowl, I think. So
it'd be fun to watch.
Yeah, that we could be looking at a game that's something like 52-45, given the two offenses and defenses that are playing in this. So, but yeah, I think you've got to be multidimensional enough. You've got to run it well enough to let Drake Maye then be Drake Maye on your terms, rather than basically doing it because you have no other choice.
That's a great point there. Greg, what you got? I was looking at the Holiday Bowl games too. Texas, Mac probably remembers this one. Texas 52, Arizona State 34 back in 2007. You got USC 45, Nebraska 42 and 14. Yeah, I see a traditional Holiday Bowl here. Greg.
Oh yeah.
Greg, Carolina's offense versus that Oregon defense. And I think folks need to recognize what Jason talked about. Gonzalez, Johnson, and Sewell out for Oregon, and those guys were studs for them all year.
And
Yeah.
Justin Flo also, their all-world linebacker in the transfer portal.
Yep.
Yeah, he didn't play much at all this year. Yeah, Gonzalez, he led the team in interceptions with 4. DJ Johnson led the team in sacks with 6. And I think you have to kind of flip that and look at Carolina and say, Carolina's best defender and Cedric Gray decided to come back. So
Carolina won the opt-out portion of the ball game.
I mean, Josh Downs is a big loss for sure, but you also have the situation where I think Oregon's over 20 guys now that they have lost either to the draft or to the portal. Carolina's not quite at that level. So it is going to look quite different. I think the key is for North Carolina to be able, and I think Jason's right on point here, but is to be able to run the ball somewhat effectively. And I know we've harped a lot on some of the struggles in the red zone. I mean, they've struggled the last couple of weeks. Again, granted, they played good defenses of being able to generate much of a rushing attack at all. And that's allowed teams to really get after Drake. And as I mentioned with Bo Nix earlier, Bo was really even in terms of when he's kept clean versus under pressure. Drake is not. I mean, if you look at Drake's numbers, he had a 94 grade when kept clean this year, which is elite of the elite. And then that plummets to 65 when he's under pressure. And he's a redshirt freshman. None of that's surprising. But when you're talking about I think 38 sacks, sacked 38 times. That's not very good. And so I think if North Carolina can establish a run game and have success to where Lonnie Galloway is able to use both the run game and the pass game, then they're going to be able to score quite a bit. And I think Oregon, if they're able to slow down the run whatsoever and get some pressure after Drake, that's when things can kind of go sideways for North Carolina. One thing I kind of want to get into, and this is a little bit off tangent, Tommy, but a lot of people have just been looking at the raw numbers between Oregon's defense and Carolina's defense. North Carolina, in terms of the raw numbers, Carolina's 105 nationally in points allowed at 31. Oregon's at 76 nationally, giving up 27.4. This is where the advanced metrics tell us a little bit different story. In terms of FEI, this is wild. Oregon has played the number 2 offense in the country in USC, the number 4 offense in the country in Georgia, the number 5 offense in the country in Washington, the number 7 offense in the country in UCLA, and the number 15 offense in the country in Utah. The best offense that Carolina's faced is Wake at number 18. The worst offense that Oregon's defense has faced was number 89 Stanford. Carolina has played 5 ACC teams ranked worse than Stanford this year. So when we talk about kind of how bad this defense has been, this defense has greatly benefited by playing really bad offenses, and the numbers are still what they are. So is Oregon a great defense? No, not whatsoever. But it is a step up from what Carolina has been all year. Now, when you take away Gonzalez and Sewell and Johnson, maybe we're leveling the playing field here. But I think fans need to understand that when you go into this game, it's not like Carolina is going to be facing its own defense on the other side of the ball. Oregon has had more success just because they've played so many really good offenses. It doesn't really show up in some of the stats.